Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with yet another Starfield news update. You know, for a company that got ahead of everybody and said, settle down, no Starfield info at this E3, they may as well have brought it because we've talked about it more than any other game on the channel in this last week, and that's ridiculous. But anyway, this information comes from an unlikely source. So it was announced during the week of E3 that Elon Musk and Todd Howard would be doing a panel together alongside Jeff Keighley doing questions and answers on cars, games, and space. Naturally, with space and Elon Musk involved, Todd Howard started to share some gameplay details on Starfield, so we have to get right into that. So let's take a dive. It starts off with Todd Howard mentioning one of his sources for inspiration and research for Starfield, where he says he visited SpaceX to know where this aspect was heading in reality to make the universe more authentic, giving it a feel of, okay, this could actually happen.
How has the stuff Elon done inspired or affected what you do, Todd, in your world?
Well, I mean, the space stuff, as we look at Starfield, you know, that's where we kind of look, okay, how are these things actually going to work in the future? Got to go to SpaceX last year. That place is like the Avengers meets NASA. Like, if anyone ever gets it, it's incredible. But what do those things look like as we do a science fiction game?
Now, I thought this was particularly interesting because of the authenticity, making that universe believable, going, okay, this could actually happen. What does that mean? Does that mean the gameplay is grounded in complete realism and there's going to be a ton of resource management while you travel through space? Now, some future comments may signify that, but I think what he's really talking about in the terms of authenticity and believing in this universe is something akin to Fallout. I don't think Fallout's going to actually happen in the terms of everyone running around with laser rifles and ghouls, but I think it's a believable universe because of the lore, the fiction that it's grounded in. I find incredibly believable, something that invests me in that universe because I could see something like this in a sense happening. I think that's what he's going for with Starfield. When they start to establish that universe and the lore, it's something that players can easily buy into, which I think enhances that enjoyment factor. It gets you more involved in what's happening around you. It becomes more immersive. So I like that their focus is on authenticity that matches up with kind of what they did in the same vein with Fallout. Afterwards are the gameplay details, where he emphasizes once more that folks need to have patience, which, you know, if you're going to do that, you may as well not go ahead and hand out gameplay details. But then he mentions what kind of fuel that the ships would use.
Everyone needs to be patient on that. But what I can say is, like, how we approach it so it feels, it's a game, but it still has an authenticity to, okay, this could happen.
Yep.
You know, we talked, like, what kind of fuel do the ships use? Like, we're using helium-3, which we can debate whether that's a good power source for spaceships.
So, like I just mentioned earlier, it seems like fuel management of some kind is going to be a thing in Starfield, meaning that we're probably going to go planet to planet throughout this, and future comments also signify that is very much the case, so let's continue. He wants space travel in Starfield to feel like flight in the 40s, aka dangerous, unsafe, the unknown. He says the term space travel actually quite a bit throughout this explanation, which I believe does allude to the idea of visiting multiple planets in game.
But that it feels like, hey, traveling in space in our game is still, let's say it's like flight in the 40s. Like, it's dangerous. It's still dangerous to go and explore. But even though lots of people do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, space is far. That's the thing.
The major question with Starfield is, are they going to take the procedural generation route where all these planets are going to be available at our fingertips, but it's going to be almost like a No Man's Sky where it's all based off an algorithm? Or is this going to be something that's handcrafted by Bethesda Game Studios, where we go planet to planet and the details are all put in there by the developer team, which naturally sounds a lot more appealing? Although I will say another game under Bethesda did sort of twist my opinion on procedural generation, at least at a AAA level, and funny enough, that's also a space game, and that's actually Prey Moon Crash. A fantastic example of how, if you really invest some resources in procedural generation and you build the levels and put procedural generation in other areas, you have something really special, even if it ties into the story, which I think made for a more mind-bending experience, which is what the original Prey sort of aimed for in its story. So I really like what they did there, and it makes me a little less hesitant on if Bethesda Game Studios were to take a dive into procedural generation in the terms of creating their own environments for these planets. But I'd like for things like quests, weapons, loot, I want that to be put together by Bethesda, not have random encounters, random generated conversations. I just don't like the idea of that because I feel that strips away some of the interaction and intimacy of the games that they tend to deliver. He also talks about how physics and gravity would work in space and how then you can gamify them.
Or how do the physics work in space and gravity and those kind of things. And that's where you get into, we have to gamify it some, so that it's not as punishing as actual space travel.
Which once again goes back to the idea of, I believe multiple planets is going to be a thing in Starfield, because if you combine all these statements of gravity, fuel, space travel, if you're going to planet, the gravity is not going to be the same on one planet compared to another. So is one planet going to have zero gravity where you're jumping extremely high heights? Is one going to keep you completely grounded? Is one planet going to be mostly water? What happens there to the movement in the game? These are questions that can only be answered naturally when we get our hands on the game, but based off some of the gameplay mechanics that Todd is hinting at, it seems like every planet's going to have its own individual feel, that space travel is going to be a very important thing, and then I imagine when going planet to planet, there will be those moments in between of space station, maybe where we refuel, we meet people, we quest, which I feel sort of makes sense, because if you're not going to have the game set on one planet, one area, like we've seen in every single other Bethesda Game Studios games, how do you have that same famous moment-to-moment gameplay where you're seeing things constantly catching your attention and all of them can possibly contain something really, really interesting? And I thought if you're traveling in space, that perhaps desolate space stations, popular colony, places to refuel. I feel like if they build their own universe that way, where there are things that are involving that moment-to-moment exploration, but it's in space, it's probably a really hard thing to balance, but if they get it right, it could have a very unique feel. The only thing I guess I get worried about is flying in a Bethesda Game Studios game. I think back to Skyrim, Dragons, and Dragonborn. I think of the horse controls, and Bethesda Game Studios games have just never got the, I don't want to call them vehicles, but that vehicular feeling in their gameplay ever right. And the idea of a core mechanic like flying a spaceship being something in Starfield, I imagine it has to be somewhat decent to fully base your game around it. You know, this is your to and fro until you land on the ground. But I guess I just get a little worried at that because I haven't really had a great experience. And actually, I think as a kid, that's kind of what molded me into just liking on-the-ground travel. Like in any video game, I just avoid vehicles entirely if I can walk there. Unless it's like, you know, Mafia or GTA, something along those lines where I feel it's a necessity. But I don't know. I just feel like Bethesda Game Studios sort of wrecked my vision of getting in vehicles and getting there comfortably. Anyway, that's the main Starfield details from the Todd Howard Elon Musk panel. It's not an absolute ton, but it actually gives us an idea of where this game's heading, and I think as Todd Howard starts to take the lid more and more off this game, it really does signify that 2020 will be the year that they unveil it. I distinctly remember pre-Fallout 4 days where Todd constantly said in 2014, yep, you know, be patient, be patient, be patient, and yep, what do you know, a year later we got Fallout 4, so I feel like we're seeing a repeat of history here. If we got to be patient, we got to be patient. And as he starts unveiling more, it signifies that more stuff is getting solidified in their game, that is something that's going to be concurrent between now and when they actually do decide to reveal it. So it'll be interesting to see what this game actually looks and plays like, because we have all this imagination, all these details to go off of, but we don't have anything concrete to base it off of. It's completely its own thing. It's not like we can do what we did with previous Fallout and Elder Scrolls speculation, where we can go based off the history of the series and compare and contrast certain things and see what things they left in the dust in previous entries that may be resurrected now. This is something entirely of its own, so it'll be really neat to see how they deliver this, how they promote it, how they market it, and also what the game plays like. So I'm looking forward to it. I will have a link to the entire panel in the description down below if you want to check it out. It's really, really interesting stuff. I mean, seeing Elon Musk go in about cars and space and talk about stuff,
A frenzied vault scientist runs up to you and yells, "I'm going to put my quantum harmonizer in your photonic resonance chamber." What's your response?
it really kind of had me twisted up in the brain. I was like, wow, I've never actually sat down to listen to this type of stuff, and now I know why, because I think my specialty lies in games and other areas, like maybe psychology to an extent, but definitely not space and machinery. Anyway, it's a great listen. It's enjoyable watching all those three people interact together. You know, it's just some icons in each of their respective industries, and I highly recommend you give it a listen. So I'll have that down below if you want to check it out. Other than that, that will be all from me. So be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I've certainly talked enough. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook while you're heading down to the description box to check out the interview. And also, do consider supporting my Patreon, as it fuels all the content I create here here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.